Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we're looking at the unbeatable front leg. So we've certainly looked at side kick at the front leg, at various shots that you can take off the front leg over the last 2 years really. This episode we're going to focus on all of the key elements that make it such a dominating threat and how to develop them for yourselves. So if it's something that you'd like to have, an unbeatable front leg, stay with us for this one.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 101 of Fight Chat Friday. So we are going to be looking at that unbeatable front leg, a very, very important aspect of ITF sparring. Anybody who has this nailed down, they're usually very hard to beat. So it is something that has come up in the last episode of something that we looked at on the dominant front leg. And of course, we got called out by Kamil Filowski, so we're going to call you out back. Of why he wasn't included. So we're going to look at this in depth today of the unbeatable front leg and what makes people with this skill very, very difficult to beat and puts them up there usually on the top of the medal podium. So it's going to be something that you want to understand. On the flip side, if you don't have that kind of like flexibility and dominant front leg anyway, you need to understand some of the things that make this work to be able to combat it and counter it as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's appropriate that it's episode 101, and you know, right now with the way things are in ITF sparring, with the level of contact, the number of breaks and things like that, that dominant front leg is so important that it kind of belongs in the fundamentals with that 101. So why not? So let's talk about variety first of all. So what do we mean by variety?
Yeah, so in terms of having a dominant front leg, if you do the same thing all the time, you're going to become very, very predictable. So you want to have that variety of being able to change it up. And here's Kamil with a great example of that off the front leg. So you want to be maybe setting some patterns and some rhythms, maybe going body, 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 and then boom, switching to the head. So that's kind of what we mean by variety, not being predictable with the front leg and always giving different looks.
The ability to change it up then as well, once the chamber is up there, and being able to transition as your opponent has moved is huge. I mean, we can see here from Julio the trampoline style one where, okay, your opponent has moved back, but I can shorten my stance as the leg drops and then change up and even go for the head. And that blind side flicky kind of turning kick, a bit of a signature move for him. I think this clip shows particularly well, you know, what's involved in the chamber. If you look at the positions the foot takes and what his opponent is trying to react to, very, very difficult to defend that appropriately.
100%. Very hard to get a read on that, and when to go. The timing then becomes very difficult as well.
And we have here with the girls, you know, once you're able to take that chamber high enough, you can threaten both sides of the head as well as, of course, going to the body, which brings that whole question, well, where do I put my front hand? And, you know, it's when you can ask that question, your opponent is like flipping coins and they have to choose the correct side each time. So, you know, except it's a three-sided coin. So your odds of getting it right are very, very, very low. And, you know, that is one of the types of variety that's really, really important. And you can see here with Luke and Timmy Boss, then the mixing in the variety of length or distance into it is something that will come into a little bit more later as well.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at variety, we're looking at variety in levels, so head and body, and also variety in shots in terms of what you said, coming to the left of your head, coming to the right of your head, coming to your body. So we're looking at all different ways that you can mix it up and essentially to become just a bigger threat. So being a threat is a big, big part of having an unbeatable front leg.
I'm absolutely jumping on that segue, and that was our next topic. So there is no point in having a good front leg if you don't present it immediately as a threat. It has to be a threat.
It has to be something that puts people under pressure. Like, so on the flip side of this, am I going to try get rid of this front leg and come through it, come under it, get rid of it? If it's a big enough threat, you're going to be on the back end there literally, because you're going to be playing second fiddle to everybody and you're not going to be the person going forward.
Absolutely. And there are different ways for it to be threatening. I mean, you know, we can talk about applying it with a certain intensity. We can talk about, like Kamil in the last one and Alameen here, floating it in the face so the person has to find a way to deal with it. Like Julio here, where it's the intention, it's carrying it forward with the intent to get, you know, to make a strong contact. So if you don't judge the timing right in terms of how you interact with it, you get shoved. And, you know, that presentation of the threat it's just a huge deal.
Yeah, we have a threat in the scoreboard, number one, but then
Yeah.
we have the threat of a big shot, a big, heavy, strong shot as well that's going to do damage to you. So they're the two things that we're going to be looking at when we look at threat.
100%. And then what helps you present that threat then is your posture and how you carry that front leg. And we've kind of spoken just a little bit about that in terms of the high chamber, but we can see some other examples here of what's possible depending on, you know, how well you've maintained your posture as you go through it.
Yeah, so like it's very simple. If your body weight is over your back like too much, you're not going to have that ability to be able to pull it back. So that's what we're going to be looking at there, mostly off that front leg. So Neil is a great example of that. He never adjusts his his body position on his front leg, and then it allows him to also threat to the head every now and again and come over the top with the hand. So it is a twofold thing that you can link other techniques up with it. If you lean too much, very hard to carry with like speed because you have all your weight to pull behind you. So that's another factor of that front leg.
Yeah, definitely. And again, if the front leg is only a threat as the opponent steps into it, it's not really as much of a threat because they can just make distance. So you need the ability to carry the leg forward and maintain that as a threat. And what that means is we don't want to have you landing heavy. You want to maintain the ability to shift the height or the variety of the kick as you're going forwards. And you don't want to have to lean so far back as you carry it forward that any little bump, anything that catches you on the way in takes you into an unbalanced position that your opponent can capitalize on.
Yeah, 100%. And then on the carry, we're looking at like quick, small steps, ideally, not big, huge, massive steps that take you a big effort to do, because there's going to be big gaps between those, which allows opportunities for counters. And as well, you're going to actually move much slower, even though you think that you're going to be making up more ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And it tends to be that if you aim for those bigger jumps on the back foot, the leg that's in the air is making slower, more ponderous and predictable movements. Whereas if those little hops are small, the knee can be rechambering, the foot can be replacing itself, and makes it more difficult for your opponent to read.
Yeah, what we see here with Ziga and Blue is the short stance and the light front leg. That's another major part of having an unbeatable front leg, because if you have to make big adjustments to adjust your stance to lift the leg, you're not going to be threatening enough, literally, with that front leg. So you need to have the correct distance between your feet for your body weight to be able to lift very easy without any big efforts either way. So you need to keep it light. So what we mean by keep it light is keep it very light on the floor so you can lift it quickly. And then you don't want a big massive stance where it becomes very hard to lift as well.
Absolutely. And being able to stay tall throughout the kick means you can connect more quickly to hands. And what that means is, look, the headshot is great, and you can see it from Vassal here with the headshots, but whether it's body or head, is kind of irrelevant to this. To build and capitalize by adding momentum, what you're looking for is the ability to get to hands, which allows you to connect the next leg as well. So that's a very, very, very big deal. And I think, one of the signature things in terms of someone being properly threatening is that ability to link shots and to be able to morph between shots. So our final element is that of distance.
Yeah, that's very important, because there's going to be times where you need that long jousting front leg, and there's going to be times when you're going to have your knee quite bent and carrying a little bit more so you can adjust between shots. So having the correct distance to be able to get that shot off is important, because having an unbeatable front leg, most of the time people are going to want to close that down, and if they have the distance right themselves, they can close it down. So you need to have space between you and your opponent to be able to get the legs off.
Yeah, and I think the ability to adjust your stance as you need it, lengthening and shortening. So going to that shorter stance when you want to push forward or change your height, and dropping into that longer stance once there's any backward movement, letting you adjust and make a defensive shot as well. And some really good examples here from Ruben, I think, in blue, in terms of having the distance, because his opponent is doing an awful lot of the same things, or trying to do an awful lot of the same things, Cody. But Ruben's distance is just a little bit better, and you can see as he goes to the front leg, he's finding the whether it's the short stopping side kicks, a longer, as you said, jousting style side kick, or something stabby, he's finding a range to make it a different threat each time for Cody to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think another feature, we haven't actually put this down as a topic or a heading, but the idea of the trampoline and the springboard. We've seen that now on most of these clips that we've taken. The ability to, if you can't carry, be able to drop quickly and lift again and use the floor almost for momentum as like a springboard. We see it here with these two as well, where they're using the floor to give them momentum and to bounce to carry them into the next shot. So that's another feature as well that's going to help you to be able to switch up the ability to change. So we links up variety, it links up different threats, it links up the distance control. So it kind of brings a lot of these things together if you can get that right.
And just that last bit, as we were looking at Vitaly here as well, the judicious use of the foot to foot. Like, you really want to spare that and not have it as your default, but every now and again it's the most extreme change of distance or length, so his opponent has moved back and it affords that opportunity to have a quick step and push. And like we saw quite a bit with the Slovenians at the last European Championships, if you're fast enough, if you're committed enough, and if your opponent is respectful enough of your front leg and preserving a distance there, then you can actually get away with a shortening step like that. It doesn't have to be all the way foot to foot, but a shortening step. But you have to go through the process first. You have to make them respect your ability with the front leg. You have to make them give you a little more distance and even be a little bit cautious and kind of maybe flinch out of range from your feints, and that then allows for that little step in and a big push, and that kind of adds to the dominance of the front leg, because when you can have that, gives you those big movements that are going to take up ring position. Perhaps your opponent travels, you get ring position, you get a warning, maybe you get a score, and all of that momentum adds up once again.
Yeah, and because it's like when somebody has a very dominant front leg, you don't want to be at the end of that front leg. So that allows for you to be a little bit more outside distance, like you said. So then that allows that to come in again. But it's very important that you link this with variety, that it's not something that you do step, because if you do that, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So you want to put that in there with the different shots that we've seen. So linking them all together is the key to this.
And we've done a little bit of work this week in trying to build a members video that highlights some of the kind of things you do in training this. But again, and highly recommend people join up, go to our members from the YouTube the YouTube page on a regular internet browser rather than the mobile one. Look for that join button, hop on over there. There's a lot of content already, and of course our members are active in terms of asking questions and giving us challenges to solve. But just as a basic concept, one of the most important things you can do in training this is ask your opponent what they're seeing. So if they're able to counter your front leg, if they're able to deal with it, ask them what they're seeing, and the chances are you're giving something away, you're doing something that's predictable, you have a rhythm that they're reading, you have some little bit of a tell, or you're changing the position of your body or your hands before you go. And then vice versa, if you're finding that somebody is really difficult to deal with in terms of their front leg, maybe ask them a little bit about what they're seeing from you. So how do they know when to go? And what challenges are they presenting and why? And, start those conversations with your training partners, because they're your best asset, they're your best resource. And if you start really leaning into what they can see, you can then see both sides of the match and make some big improvements fast.
100%. And that's what we've seen in this week's members video. So definitely check that out if you are on the members side. You'll see how both sides of the coin actually help you to understand the big picture much better. So definitely check that out. Use some of the things that we've worked on and try to use that to build an unbeatable front leg. It's definitely something you want in the arsenal, and build that up, and you can be very, very dominant with it if possible. So definitely check it out.
Excellent. So folks, that's us for this Friday. We'll see you next week.
See you next one.